I think the big difference is in how you influence people and how you influence. I mean, you have to have a platform. People have to trust you as a person
Yeah,
and
that's
as a
right.
leader. They have to know you, you have their back to a certain degree. And if you're always working on building that business relationship, I tell leaders, you don't have to be friends with your employees. You absolutely do not. But if you can build a solid business relationship with them, that goes very well. But for me, there are four key pieces to influencing people and getting them
Okay.
on board. And I do say, look, if you're going to use their positional influence or your positional authority, just use it when you need to use it. It's one of those you need to pull back on because people will they'll feel as though you're micromanaging, you're
Yeah.
pushing them, that it's your rules. And if you think about the outcomes that you want, like what result do you want? You don't want that all the time. You don't want people working for you just because you're the boss. You want them to work for you because you inspire them, you drive them, and they will work harder for you if they have something bigger to think about.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Your Lab Central. Today, I have with me David. So, David, would you like to tell our audience why they should be excited about this conversation today?
Well, yeah, I can certainly talk a little bit about that. My background is I've got a vast background in many different industries, and what I've learned over the years is that a big piece of that is being a strong and effective leader. And
Mhm.
I love to talk about what that means in life, what it means in business. So hopefully, there's we can get some great stuff coming out of today.
Okay, so there's a lot of leadership people that I've talked to. Okay, now one question that I like to put to everybody is that what is one problem that you're seeing with most leaders today?
Most leaders, oh my goodness, one problem. There's so many. I think one of the biggest problems, and it's kind of an overarching
Hmm.
is there's a tendency to overcomplicate things a little bit, and what I
Uh-huh.
mean by that, every business is structured a certain way,
Yeah.
and life, there's lots of complexities in life, but we don't have to make it so complicated. I think if we can, as people, individuals, leaders, kind of try to cut through all the noise and
Mhm.
figure out what's most important right now. What impact can I have right now? And I think that's probably one of the biggest things because there are so many, with the economy and what's going on in the business and competition. There's
Yeah,
so much incoming, and people have a hard time sorting through it.
yeah. Now, since you talked about it, cutting through the noise and everything else, right? Uh, Leaders specifically, and you mentioned about how can I create impact right now? What's the thing that will create right now, the thing. But for leaders, there's a lot of people who talk about long-term vision, right? Seeing in
Mhm.
the distance. So how do you balance this, that creating impact right now, but then also ensuring that impact will be created, say, next year or 5 years down the line?
Yeah, good question. It on all levels, whether you're thinking about yourself as an individual contributor, as a manager, as a senior leader, as a company, the first thing you have to do is you've got to decide what do we want to achieve? What is the outcome? What does the target look like?
Yeah.
And as long as you always have that target in mind, whether it's a 6 months out, a year out, some companies try to go out 10 years. That's a little more challenging, but you can certainly look at the 3 to 5. But we know what the target is,
Yeah.
then how to get there, what's most important becomes more clear because you can always see the target.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be obstacles, things that get in the way, but then what's most important gets you around and or over the hurdles, and it keeps you on the right track to get to whatever that target is, whatever you decide it is, what you want it to be.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of back and forth when it comes to setting targets, right? Leaders themselves alone cannot have that target obviously, they will have one target in mind that they
Mhm.
want to set, but then the team also has to collaborate and agree to the fact that, yeah, this is a target that everybody can achieve together. So,
Yeah.
how is that communication to be handled?
The I think, well, let me start with the leaders or leadership team needs to formulate whatever that target is or what that strategy is.
Yeah.
They have to formulate that first in their mind. And then the most important thing from there is you need to articulate what that is.
Hmm.
And I don't want it to be necessarily a top down, you must do this, although oftentimes
Yeah.
that's what needs to happen sometimes. But let's make sure we're what's in our mind, what that target is, or what the strategy is, that it's being understood by the people around you, which requires some dialogue, some opinions, getting that buy-in, or the consensus. Consensus. You don't have to agree with it, but you got to support it. Getting that buy-in and consensus does require some dialogue, some feedback, some input. If you leave that part out, then it's really just top down. So getting that input drives the engagement, drives the commitment, and that usually keeps people on the right track. At least from my experiences working with the companies that I do.
Okay, so is there a specific framework that you've been using with the people that you've engaged with in the past, right? Or is there something that you've developed right now uh, that you want to share?
The the framework in terms of keeping people focused and keeping them
Yeah,
on target.
yeah,
Well, no, I'm glad you brought that up. I recently just published a book, and in the book there are three basic principles that I subscribe to, or I teach to my clients. And the first one is target, which is essentially just that.
yeah,
What is your target? So if you're a company, mission, vision, values, who is our ideal client profile? What's the value we want to provide? If you're part of a team, you need a team charter. Who do we serve? How do we drive success? If you're an individual, similar. So that's the first one. That's really the target, because what it does, it sets people up for that
yeah,
focus, and really keeps people, no shotgun, but more of a laser focus. The next part is energize, and the energize piece is really ideal for leaders who are leading groups of people or people in general. Energizing people, getting them on board. If we don't get them on board, then they're just executing based on this is what you think it is, this is what you
yeah,
want it to be as the leader, but they have to believe in it themselves. So you've got to energize them, keep them connected. And with that, you have to remember the people skills component, right? People need to trust and respect you. They don't need to like you, but that's always a good
yeah,
thing. But it's a trust and respect piece. So get them on board. And then the third piece is really the accountability piece. So that's what I call influence. And you can certainly carry a big stick and tell people they must do this and be
yeah,
very aggressive with them around accountability. I like companies and leaders to build a culture of accountability where people hold themselves accountable. They feel good about it. They're achieving for themselves as much as they are for the company. So target, energize, influence are the three main pieces. Now, there's lots of different nuances that come with all those,
yeah.
but at a high level, that's the model I like to use.
Now, it's just that so many questions come up when you hear about targets, energizing and inspiring, right? Now, specifically, just from my personal observations and stuff, energizing is something that not everybody is equally able to do, right? You may be a good
Sure.
leader and you go into a new environment and then you're trying to rally people behind you because you've got a great idea and you feel that this is the best step for the company, but then there's
Mhm.
no buy-in coming in from the employees or your team or your juniors or whatever you want to call them. Some people are just able to do that naturally. There's people call it a warm vibe or just being
Sure.
relatable, something of that sort. So, where does the difference lie between somebody who's able to get people to rally behind themselves and somebody who's just entering and just trying to energize people, but is not able to do that?
Uh, it varies depending on the individual. As you said,
Yeah,
everyone has their own style, their own personality. They have certain aspirations themselves. Uh, I think the big difference is in how you influence people, and how you influence. I mean, you have to have a platform. People have to trust you as a person
yeah,
and
that's
as a
right.
leader. They have to know you. You have their back to a certain degree. And if you're always working on building that business relationship, I tell leaders, you don't have to be friends with your employees. You absolutely do not. But if you can build a solid business relationship with them, that goes very well. But for me, there are four key pieces to influencing people and getting them
Okay.
on board. The first one, which I say use sparingly, is the positional influence. I'm the boss, so I want you to follow me. And I think it's okay to use that in sparing amounts. Sometimes you
Yeah.
have to pull that out. The next two kind of go together. One of them is your passion and your emotion for what you believe in, um, how you want people to be, how, the type of organization you want to build,
Hmm.
and the expertise that you have. If you can bundle those two,
Hmm.
that can be super powerful in influencing. And then the fourth part, which is what I said earlier, it's about the relationship. That's really the human connection, right? Are you making a connection with people? And I know, like you said a moment ago, some people are very good. They just create a good vibe. They're very personable.
Hmm.
Not everybody is, and not everybody's going to be. But I
Yeah.
think if you can learn yourself, how can I be more, how can I create a greater connection with my personality?
Hmm.
And doing that, you have to think about where the other person is coming from, what motivates them personally, what drives them personally, and then use that to connect it to your mission and what you're trying to achieve.
So, okay, there's just one thing that's stuck in my mind right now, that
Okay.
positional authority that you talked about that we must be using sparingly. It's just that to some people it comes so naturally that they use it every time, or it just
Mhm.
becomes a part of the culture for the company to basically do that commandeering method of getting things done. Uh,
Yes.
how do you reverse that? Have you ever had people trying to reverse that? How did you help them out?
Oh, I think, well, especially for emerging younger leaders, they believe because they get a title, all of a
Hmm.
sudden they have all this authority, and they do. It's difficult because, especially for younger people, because they don't, or younger leaders, they don't recognize that you don't need to use it. And when I'm working with them, it's usually when I get feedback for, let's say I'm coaching somebody and I'm getting feedback from them and they hear from me. It's like, okay, look, you're doing a good job over here,
Yeah.
but this, you're a naturally assertive person. They go, yes, I am. Okay, great, wonderful. That could be of value, but do you think you're using that too often?
Yeah.
And I go to the what result do you want to get ultimately, either in the moment, for your culture, for a project, or for a company. What result do you want to get, and what's going to produce that best result? And I do say, look, if you're going to use their positional influence or your positional authority, just use it when you need to use it. It's one of those you need to pull back on because people will feel they'll feel as though you're micromanaging, you're
Yeah.
pushing them, that it's your rules. And if you think about the outcomes that you want, like what result do you want? You don't want that all the time. You don't want people working for you just because you're the boss. You want them to work for you because you inspire them, you drive them, and they will work harder for you if they have something bigger to think about.
Okay. Now, if there was a challenge that you've seen come up recently, okay, due to the changing circumstances or just people starting to work online, going hybrid, is there anything,
Mhm.
something new that's coming up that leaders are facing these days?
Oh boy. New, that's really a tough one. I think the newest thing is probably because we are more remote, we're more
Yeah.
virtual than we ever have.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not the skills that have changed, but it is the methods in which we employ the skills. So
Yeah.
leadership's been around forever, right? It's been
Yeah.
around longer than, thousands of years. What we have to remember is that, well, people are still people. Leadership is still leadership. But what has changed is our environment.
Mhm.
Generations have changed. That's a tough one for leaders. We've got, well, still, but four, five different generations in the workplace today. We have we have
Yeah.
online interaction. It's good. The video is great, but sometimes it's not as good.
I
So
look at it.
we have to work harder at recognizing what motivates people, and there's a broad spectrum, and
Yeah.
we have to recognize that we have to lead differently or more intentionally because we're not doing it's not always face to face.
Hmm.
Those are probably the biggest ones, and of course getting people back to the office is every CEO I work with, they're losing their minds. It's like, how do I get people back to the office? Is it, look, it's going to happen, maybe not 100%, but it's going to get better. We just have to learn how to be more effective in what we do.
Okay, since you brought this up, I want to ask you, what's your take on work from home versus work from office?
Yeah. I think it depends on the kind of business. I have
Yeah,
businesses
yeah,
that have
that's true.
always
Yeah,
been virtual,
yeah, that's
all of
true.
them.
Uh-huh.
I have an IT company. They
That,
provide managed services, and they said, yeah, we don't care where people live,
that's
and
right.
actually, it's a benefit to us.
Yeah.
But I think there are some types of businesses that really do need people to be there in person to strategize or be creative. And and I've witnessed it. We came from the pandemic, into the pandemic, out of the pandemic. I've been with the same companies for years, and you can see the difference. And people say, yes, it's still better in person. However, one small thing, I think what we have to do, because life for a lot of people can be challenging. And I don't mean we give them a pass, but I think we need to be flexible. If someone says, I need some time off, or we're giving someone time off during the week. So I think you have to apply it specifically,
Hmm.
tailor it to your business, and just make sure that you're creating a culture where people want to work hard, they want to stay.
Yeah.
That's how I would look at it. There's no one model that I think works. I don't see it happening that way.
Okay. Uh, we were talking about inspiring, right? Out of the three, you mentioned inspire as the third one. Now,
Yeah.
inspiring in the digital
Well, it
realm.
was
Oh,
influence, and
sorry.
then
I'm
yeah,
sorry. Yeah.
influence, inspire. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the influence, right, in the digital realm, since we are virtually talking and so on. So you must also be using the internet or just these podcasts, like going out, talking to
Oh,
a lot of
sure.
people, right? So is this working well, specifically for you and for others, right? Are you seeing good effects or growth in influence, when it comes to things like that?
Hmm. I think within organizations,
Mhm.
certainly if you're marketing yourself, there's no question. I think people want
Mhm.
to see, they want to hear
Yeah.
hear you real time. They don't want something scripted. They want something that's genuine.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. Within the companies, what I'm seeing, they're trying to create greater connection with their employees. That's not easy to do when you have all the business pressures that you do. So the companies that are meeting, they're meeting deliberately. I find them spending more time on it's not a report out meeting, it's not a goals meeting, it's a what's happening in the business. How are we doing? Can we do better? I think they're spending more time thinking about how they can improve the environment.
Yeah.
uh, Virtually, every company is, they've got an intranet of some kind. They're always trying
Yeah.
to stay connected, surveys. To be honest, I don't know how well it's working. I'm not saying it's not working, so I don't want to criticize any particular company. But I think what, especially the youngest generation, the Gen, we get the Gen Zs, and I think what they want is they want a connection to the company, but specifically a connection to their manager. Do they feel as though they have a good relationship there and a good relationship with their team? So, with all the different tools, I don't use them all, but I use Teams. Companies use Slack. I've heard good things about tools like that because it keeps people connected and plugged in. Because I think every single employee wants to know what's going on in
Yeah.
the business, what's happening around me. I don't want surprises. So I see that part of it as being really valuable.
Because there are a lot of companies that are using Yammer, and then they have an internal version of Facebook or something of that sort. They have
Yep.
people putting out posts and which is visible only to the employees. And it just becomes another version of Facebook, right? They're talking about their pets or the families and something of that sort. Creating that, trying
Yeah,
to
there's some of
create
that.
that. Yeah. So I've seen it in a couple of companies that I've worked with. So they do have that, and it does create a homely atmosphere. Because coming from a younger generation, and then I see Gen Zs in the office, so they're more like it's not just the manager that we want to connect with. We also need a connection with why is the company itself doing what it is doing, the purpose itself. So,
Yep.
what's the role
Yep.
of leadership, right, in trying to create that connection?
There's a lot of pieces to it.
Hmm.
If you're talking about a very, very large organization, a
Yeah.
Fortune 100 type, they figured that stuff out. It's not easy for them either because the business is so big. I tend to work with smaller companies, and oftentimes, I'll ask a question when I'm working with either the CEO directly or the CEO's leadership team. Why does your company exist? The why, asking the why question. And sometimes, say, well, it's on the website. We have a mission statement. It's like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Let's simplify it. Does every single person in the company understand what that is, what that's all about? And just a real quick story in this, because people relate to stories well. There's a
Yeah.
company I worked with years ago, and well, just a few years ago, and it was a long relationship. And I did some strategy work with them. I said, "Why do you exist?" And of course, the founder said, "Well, to make money." I said, "Well, with all due respect, that's not the reason why you exist. That's the result of doing well and why
Yes.
you exist." And it was a company that was a plant propagator. They grew flowers, and
Right.
so I went through the process, and you say, well, so you grow these beautiful flowers with all these colors. Why do you exist? And I'm going to shorten the story, but they ended up with, well, we bring happiness to people's lives
Right.
because they see all this beauty that they can go and they can plant these flowers, they can create a beautiful garden for themselves, and they
Yeah.
realize, oh, I said that's why we exist. So to get to the second part of the question, and this is what I said, great, now that you've got this, now I want you to go educate every single person in your company. I want you to educate every manager and every supervisor to let people know the reason why they do what they do is because they're bringing happiness to people's lives. It's
Mhm.
no different than what healthcare professionals do. They're making people healthier.
Yeah.
So I think if we can simplify the purpose, the why, and then talk about it, educate people, uh, connect their what they do and their behaviors to that value, it makes a huge difference.
Now, it's wonderful that you brought back simplification into the conversation itself, because we started by not talking about leaders trying to overcomplicate things and not putting things in order and just simplifying their way through life or work, right? Now,
Yes.
what's one step you have taken to simplify your work? Let's just, if I can ask you that.
Oh, in terms of my business,
Yeah.
or oh, let's see. That's a really good question. No one's asked me that one. Let me think about that for a second. I think it's something I've always done is I personally
Yeah.
like to see how things work. I happen to have an engineering degree,
Mhm.
and I ended up in this space for a very particular reason. But I have an engineering oriented mind. I can see how things work. Something's not working. I can take it apart and say, okay, that's the piece that's not working. So in my business, what I've always liked to do is like, how do I systematize this? How do I create scalability through
Mhm.
understanding what is the best pathway forward. Going back to what's the target? Okay, I can see the target. What's the most effective way to get there? And still achieving along the way, living up to my values, but I have to say, what is that pathway forward?
Yeah.
So it's, consistently over time, I'm trying to find ways to simplify or streamline. I don't want to make
Yeah.
it simple. It doesn't, people think simplify means simple, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
Simplify means carve out the stuff that doesn't make sense,
Mhm.
follow that path consistently, and then improve it along the way. So that's something I've done. Now, am I there? Well, probably not. I probably have more work, and I'm sure I do. But that's and I tell my clients the same thing. Let's figure out how to get there in the most efficient manner.
Mhm.
And that takes a lot of stress off you. So that's what I've done. And that's probably, if I think about the underlying simplification that I've done, that certainly is it.
Okay. Now, there's something that I've been thinking about a lot, right? When you're trying to streamline things, create a process flow, make systems out of them, there's a limit to idiot proofing the system or the streamline itself, right?
True, true,
Uh,
true. Yes.
where do you draw the line?
In terms of idiot proofing it,
Yeah.
uh, I'm not sure I draw the line. Let me see if I can answer the question in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the people who are going to build or improve the system or the process in the best way are the people doing it, right? These are
Right.
the
Yeah.
people involved. I've seen companies in years past Senior management comes in, we're going to fix this process, we're going to fix this part of the business without involving the people who are actually doing the work.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they come
Exactly.
in and they say, this is a better way to do it. And people sit there scratching their head. It doesn't, this doesn't make sense. I like to go the other way and say, if, yes, senior management should be involved to say, we'd
Yes.
like to see better performance here.
Uh-huh.
So when I say there's no limit, I think leave it up to the people who have most of the knowledge, the ones who are involved, who are engaged in it. Let them come up with that process.
Oh,
And I would say simplify it as far as you possibly can. So I don't think there is a limit. Actually, if there is a limit, it's the people doing the work.
yeah.
Let them refine, let them improve. I mean, that's the whole fundamentals in lean manufacturing is the people doing the work are the ones who should be figuring out how to do it better. Don't tell them,
Yeah.
engage them, empower them.
Hmm.
So I've sort of answered the question, sort of haven't, but I guess I don't see a limitation, but if there is, it's going to be the people doing the work. Leave it up to them.
Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I've been thinking about it for quite a few days, so it just hit me in the head, right, when we started talking about systems and streamlining stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining in. So before we end, can you just tell us the name of your book because you've not mentioned it yet?
Oh, no, I've not mentioned it yet. So the book is called Simplicity Driven Leadership.
Okay.
And the simplicity part, I think, speaks to it. That's why so the subtitle is three key principles that will help your business thrive. It's on Amazon. It's a hardcover, soft cover, and it's also on it's an ebook, so it's Kindle. Haven't done the Audible version. That's coming up. That'll be next. It's a quick read. It was designed to be a quick read because I want anybody to be able to read through it and use it as a manual or a guide in their leadership and helping their companies.
Okay. Thank you so much. So before we close, where else can people get in touch with you if they want to?
The best way to get in touch with me would be probably my email address, which is David at liddellconsulting.com. Liddell is Liddell. I also have a website, liddellconsulting.com. So that's a great way. There's tons of information there, all my contact information there. And yeah, that's the easiest way. That's the way most people contact me. I do give my cell phone out to my clients, but I don't think people want to call. They'll probably want to email.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much for joining in on this episode of Your Lab Central. To the audience who's been watching and listening, do leave a like if you liked what we talked about. The comment section is always open for suggestions, perspectives, and any questions that you might have. And don't forget to subscribe before you close the window. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much, David.